because it's already a few minutes after noon. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our ID series. And we really have a special treat today. We are very lucky to have two speakers from our own Christiana Care to give us an overview of the research administration and of the Office of Sponsored Program processes. But before I introduce our speakers, let me go over some housekeeping issues. Our next ID series, so that will be next week, we will have Dr. Sarah Kahn from University of Delaware, who will talk about risk factors for adverse prostate cancer outcomes. So please do not forget to register through the Christiana Care portal, and our full ID series schedule is posted on the ACCEL DE-CTR website. We also have a tech talk next month that will be on February 6th, and it's also Dr. Gary Henry from University of Delaware. So don't miss also this tech talk. So again, we are really delighted to have Dr. Omar Khan and Deborah Armand to come to give us a talk today. Dr. Omar Khan has multiple titles. He's the president and CEO of the Delaware Health Science Alliance, which is a collaboration between the major health sciences institutions in the Delaware Valley. He's also physician leader of the Research Administration and Scientific Affairs. He's also president of the Delaware Academy of Medicine and Delaware Public Health Association, and is also faculty in the Department of Family and Community Medicine. Deborah Armand is the director of Office of Sponsored Programs at Christiana Care and works very closely with Dr. Khan to lead the Office of Sponsored Program. So again, we are delighted and we can't wait. Thank you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to get us started here, and Debbie will join us in just a few minutes. For folks who are coming in, please feel free to file in, grab lunch. There may be a couple of seats up here, maybe not, but hopefully you're good with standing. Some of you have standing desks. If not, you have standing lunch. It's probably healthy for us. So before we get started, I want to get a sense of who all are in the room today. So how many of you consider yourself researchers? Great. How many of you, and these are overlapping titles, so how many nurses and providers and physicians, administrators, health policy experts, epidemiologists? We have someone from every category here. Okay, this is wonderful. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the process, of course, of research proposal submission, and we'll certainly go through the nuts and bolts of that. But it's also an opportunity to talk more broadly about research at Christiana Care. And as you know, we've had a long and proud tradition of conducting research of different sorts at the health system. Before, when we were the Medical Center of Delaware, it's really continued on since then, but it's changed more recently. If you were to, for those of you who've been around, more than a couple of years, David Paul, you look around and you'd see that Dr. Dressler's here too. Oh, you escaped that this time. You'd look around and you'd see that research has never been more robust at Christiana Care. You look around this room, 15, 20 years ago, there'd be a few folks doing, the different kinds of important research projects, but not in the kind of aligned way that I think we're all functioning now. I want to give a shout out to Dr. Jerkovitz, Dr. Mia Pappas, and all of our colleagues at the ACCEL program, including Dr. Scott Siegel as well, who worked together to lead the ACCEL program. Or for those of you who don't know, this series was actually started, if I remember correctly, Claudine, when we got the ACCEL grant, which is one of the largest NIH grants in the state of Delaware, multi-institution grant that serves to bring institutions together around research. And so certainly very grateful to the ACCEL folks. We always start with the Christiana Care Way, because that's what guides every type of work we do, including research, which is to serve our neighbors as respectful, expert, caring partners in their health. And we do this by creating innovative, effective, affordable systems of care that our neighbors value. And as we think about research, we think about our mission and how we accomplish that. And we accomplish that guided by our values of love and excellence. And I know that all of you have lived these values every day. In our team meetings, we ask for folks to actually call out what they've seen in action with the values every time we meet. So we won't do that today because this is somebody else's meeting, but I hope you'll think about that as well. So we start by thinking about what do we call research? How do we define research? how does this fit with and further our collective aims and institutional mission? This is actually sort of a new way of thinking for us. So several of you are from, how many of you have worked at a different institution having done research than Christiana Care / Medical Center of Delaware? Virtually all of you. So you know research is defined differently at different places, right? So here, honestly, I think it used to be that if it's funded and if you can do it, great, you should do it. That's the criteria for whether we should do that type of research. And I think that's changing now, and I think that's certainly for the better. We need to think about how does it further our collective aims and mission. We want to know about where we currently invest, where should we focus in the future, again, in terms of our research projects, and how do we accomplish this in a uniquely Christiana Care way, right? We are actually fairly unique. We're one of the largest health systems in the country. We're about the 20th largest health system in the country. We do a lot of patient care, a lot of patient volume, but we do a lot of other things as well. And so we are an independent academic health center. We're not a small community hospital. We're not a university hospital. We are actually the hybrid of what I think is the best of both. And research, I think, should be the best of both as well. So we have to first define what is research. It's really important to get our definitions right, because if you say, what is it? And the guy says, well, you said to do an abstract. It's pretty clear what an abstract is, right? So, right, a small art joke there, very small. So research administration, these are some of our colleagues. I'm privileged to work with an amazing team here. Today we'll be talking mostly about the Office of Sponsored Programs side of the house, which is pre-award, but it encompasses Office of Sponsored Programs led by Debbie Harmon, Research Finance, which is post-award. But again, we encourage you to talk to Brianna Maloney, their director, ahead of time to talk about your budgets and what may be allowable and not allowable and things of that sort. And of course, the IRB, led by Dr. Jerry Castellano. All of you know Jerry, I think, at some point or another. He's an amazing resource for our work. So an operational definition of what we consider research for the Office of Sponsored Programs is extramural funded activities of knowledge generation. So extramural meaning that we're not talking about intramurally funded work, such as graduate medical education research, such as grants through the Physicians Professionalism Council, PPC, although we certainly keep track of that work. We're not directly involved with overseeing it. And they have to be funded. Funded would be nice. Funded is important, and we'll talk more about funds as we go through this as well. So the strategic direction of research, I get asked this a lot. What is our research mission? You know, do we support research? And so the short answer is, of course, we support research. That's why we're all here. That's why we have one of the largest NIH grants in the state. That's why we have a robust and thriving clinical research enterprise. That, of course, we support research. But where can we grow this work? I want to think about, what do we do in the future? Is everything we do currently of value? Because if it isn't, then we should think about doing the work that is of higher value, right? We shouldn't be spending all of our time on, the kinds of things that maybe don't add value to our time and of the institution, and spend our time on other important things. Where are the cost-benefit outliers? We'll show you some data about that as well. And if we refocus our efforts, will we in fact get towards higher value? Broadly speaking, this is sort of my understanding of what research strategy really means to us here. What matters to Delaware and the region, right? That's important. What matters to Christiana Care? There may be some important projects we're looking at. Generally, where research is needed. So where research is needed for the universe that may or may not matter necessarily to Delaware or even to Christiana Care directly. And where research delivers a return on investment. And you can define ROI in different ways. Of course, it can be financial, but most of the time we define it by impact. And that can be impact on our communities, on our patients, on our caregivers. And of course, it can mean also the financial bottom line. When you hit all four, you've got the sweet spot. That's great. That's a yes for anything, right? If you're hitting just one, though, then I think that also prompts the conversation. If it just, if you're only thinking about just ROI, but none of the other three things, then is that really high value to the institution? That's sustainable. That's something you're going to be able to build a coalition around. And I think that's really important to think about. So just some broad background here, research administration at Christiana Care. Between our component units here, Office of Research Finance, Office of Sponsored Programs, IRB, we have 17 members, which is actually a relatively small number when you look at universities and health systems across the country to accomplish the kind of research enterprise we have here. We had 333 submissions to the OSP in fiscal year 18. I won't go through all of the kinds they have. We have 25 research cost centers, which actually breaks down to 773 grant IDs in Workday. Thank you, Brianna, for managing that, you and your team. We have our funded amount of active grant IDs, $43 million, and the FY18 research revenue is about $20 million. So, it's not a small amount of money we're talking about. It certainly pales in comparison to our overall budget, but, research does generate a lot of time, energy, investment, money, and so it behooves us to look at that carefully. By funder type, this is the active amount by funder type. So a lot of it, as you will notice, is in the state category here. That's 30% in the state category, 38% is pharma and industry sponsored, so it could be device trials, could be cancer clinical trials and so forth. 16% is federal funding, and then we have higher education funding, 12%, and healthcare is about 3% here. And we have a small amount from foundation funding, Packard Foundation, Thrasher, and so forth. By research cost center, we can break down the data here. Again, there isn't going to be a quiz on this later on. The point is to show you we have this type of information. Let's see if we can break it down a little further. So if you look at our active awards, don't have to worry about the numbers. These are just the active awards. You can see some of the larger awards we've received are in cancer pharmaceuticals, cancer grants in general, the Gene Editing Institute, the HIV program, women's health, family medicine, health equity. So you can kind of see where things break down. And there's certainly overlap here as well. A certain department may be listed as having received the award, but almost always for these large awards, they're working with multiple different groups of people. We can break it down by funding source. The same data I just showed you, we can break it down by what percentage, say, of the HIV program. You see most of it's coming from federal subawards. We can break it down by that as well. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Debbie Harmon, to lead you through some of the nuts and bolts, and then I'll come back. Thank you, Debbie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I'd like to give you an overview of our research, our OSP grant submission processes, and then tie in a little bit as to how we collaborate in research administration with your teams. So we'll start off with how an idea becomes an award. And it starts with, in the bottom right corner, where the light bulb goes off, and we have an investigator with an idea. And then once the investigator looks at the idea and develops the opportunity, they move along the process up through the path to get to our dollars of award. So as you're working with your departments, you're going to be working with your administrative team, as well as your service line team, as well as your department chairs. And you're going to be pulling together all the requirements that are needed by Christiana Care and by the sponsor in order to submit an application for funding. And you're going to finally get that approved and then move it along the process. Along those lines, you'll be engaging with the OSP and the IRB. OSP will be able to give you guidelines about what type of things are required, what needs to be submitted, when those deadlines are. And the IRB will be working with you on research that involves human subjects, regulatory compliance, and things of that nature. When the completed package arrives in the OSP, then we will go through a full compliance review. We will be working with you, so we still need to be engaged with you if there are any items of follow-up that additionally need to be included. We also coordinate with legal and with finance, because every proposal receives a legal review and approval and a finance review and approval. So our whole community is involved in making sure that everything that comes through is compliant and puts you in the best position to be awarded funds. The cover committee may occasionally also get involved with reviews. Those reviews are as needed. Once everything is complete, we move forward to submit your application to your sponsor. We want to advise you that the PIs for certain sponsors, they will reach back out directly to the PI for additional information. So you want to be mindful of that, and if you do receive contact, that needs to be responded to on a priority basis, because that ensures that you continue to move forward in the sponsored review process. And then if you are funded, again, you would engage with OSP and legal to do your contracting, and once the contracting and award acceptance is done, then we would move you over to research finance, who would set up your grant ID, set up your accounting mechanism in the financial system, and then continue to work with you through the post-award process. Just a few touch points to highlight again for your idea becoming an award. Partnering with the OSP, PIs, and research managers throughout every step of the process is key. Partnering with the IRB as needed is key in all of your advance work to come up with the final product. Involving you as a PI and the research manager, involving your departments and service line leaders early on is important because you will have to obtain their final approval before your application can be moved forward. And we just want to let you know that what we're doing when you're coming to us, we're completing compliance reviews, both for what's required in our institution and what is required by external agencies and funders. Again, to make sure that once it leaves Christiana Care, it is in the most proper position to help you move forward for an award. So there is an established set of timelines in place for an award submission process. The days here are listed in business days before the sponsor's due date. So we structure it backwards. We recommend that 45 days, between 45 days and 11 days, you have notified the OSP of your intent to submit, and you include the funding announcement. This should actually be done as soon as you are sure that you are interested in doing that. From there, you're preparing the required documents, and there are required documents for Christiana Care compliance, and there are required documents for your grant application. And once you've submitted that intent to us, we will look through it and provide you with a checklist to let you know the exact things that we are expecting to be included. Within 15 to 11 days of the process, this is before the sponsor's deadline, you should be working on developing and finalizing budgets. And again, there are budget requirements for Christiana Care's review and approval, and there are budget requirements for your proposal. So if you need assistance with budgeting, which is something that the OSP offers, you can reach out to us. Usually people are reaching out to us at that point in time because your proposal has thoroughly been developed by then, and we'll be looking at more of what the final budget should be. But should you need any assistance prior to that to get started or anything, please feel free to reach out. The 10th day before the application is due is the date that you have to submit it to the OSP as a final product for final reviews. The one exception to that is that your science. If your science is not completed by that time, we can accept the draft of the science. All other documents should be completed, and then we are able to move forward with our compliance reviews. And then 10 days to the deadline for the sponsor, within that period after OSP has received it, reviews are being done. If anything is missing, then we're reaching back out to you. If anything needs corrections, then we're reaching back out to you. We're working together to get the final proposal complete. We also coordinate in that time period the legal review and approval, and we coordinate in that time period a finance review and approval. So many times people say, why 10 days? There are a great number of processes that occur within that period and a great number of schedules to coordinate between, and that's the period that's needed to allot for all of that. And we have been successful in doing that, so don't have any concerns. The final science then is finally required to be to us by the 3rd business day before the deadline. And that allows time for it to be incorporated into your final application so that submission to the sponsor is done by or before the deadline. So just to summarize up what's going on that whole timeline, And I do want to mention back here, these are summary components of the timeline. Once you get into that, each of these have many different steps involved. So once you are actually working on it, your grant administrator that's assigned to your project will be working with your internal administrator from your department to help guide you through all of those steps. So this is an abbreviated format, but just to let you know, there are a lot of things that take place. So because of that, the timeline is estimated out 45 to 11 days before the submission date. That's what you as the PI and the project manager are control of. That's the time period that's allotted for you to complete all the tasks that you need to write your proposal, to get the approvals from within your department, and submit a completed package to the OSP. So that's a general timeline. If you are working on a grant that is more complexities to it, if you're working on something that has other partners involved, then you need to, take a look at that and maybe extend out before the 45 days, so you're up 50 or 60 days. So that's something that you control, and that's something that you need to plan for. Just knowing that by the 11th day, you should really have it completed for submission the next day. And the 10 business days prior to the sponsor submission deadline is the date that you're submitting it to the OSP. And again, there are many different processes that take place within that 10-day window. That is a 10 business day window. So institutional approvals, reviews, receipt of the final science, and then final submission to the sponsor. It depends on how much work is put in up front, how quickly it goes through. But we're always there to help you along the way. So we would just emphasize that starting early and engaging us as soon as possible produces the best outcome. So just some general things, as I've already stated, but if you have some complex tasks or more involved grants, additional time will probably be needed other than that guideline. We in the OSP are here to work with you and to help you get your application through. So if there's some kind of an exception going on, please reach out to us and we will work with you to make it through that process. For example, you have all of it completed, but you don't have a letter of recommendation or something that needs to be submitted. Just let us know what's going on so that we can help to work around that. And as you're working through your process, there will be a grant administrator assigned to your project. That's a person you'll be working with on an ongoing basis. However, we do welcome you to call any of our directors, including Dr. Khan, at any point through the process to provide any guidance, answer any questions. So just as a summary slide as to who should you contact, when should you contact us, what parts of research administration is involved in your submission. So in the pre-grant stages, you would be dealing with the OSP and the IRB. And some of the main categories that you were dealing with in OSP would be your intent to submit, would be returning you your checklist, your proposal document submissions, your budget preparation. So those are the main components that you would be dealing with in the beginning, pre-grant stages. During the grant, after you have received an award, you would again be dealing with all three of our areas. OSP would be involved with you in award contracting. We do that in coordination with the legal department. We assist with amendments, and we would be contacted for budget revision. So as you're ongoing, if you have changes to your budget, you have changes to personnel or things of that nature, then you would contact the OSP so that we could get that through the appropriate processes and then passed on to everyone for use. You'd also be working with the IRB in any issues involving human subjects protections. It's always good to keep in touch with Jerry on those things. He welcomes the opportunity to just talk it through ahead of time if you like, because it's always better to get it done up front. And with research finance, you will be dealing with them for all of your grant accounting and financial needs. And then after the grant, you would have a tendency to deal with, again, IRB. Depending on what type of projects you have, there are subsequent reporting requirements in place, and you would continue until he would let you know when you were no longer needing to do those things. And then again, with research finance, on any closing activities that you have with the grants, you'd be working with them. So we have a continuum of service within the research administration team throughout your grant process. And that was my summary. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Just wanted to emphasize a couple of points there. The key thing really is collaboration, right? And I hope you got that message there. We really want to hear from folks, early and often. So I think in the last couple of years, this really has been a bit of a shift in Christiana Care culture as well, that we welcome these conversations. And we've had PIs come to us a year ahead of time saying, I don't even have the information from the NIH yet, but I want to apply for the Scobie Award. How should we do this? And we said, that's complex enough that we actually need a team member. We can offer you a team member on your committee throughout the process. We'll meet with you monthly if you'd like and help you get through this. The ACCEL grant is another example of how complex awards need to get done. So we want to make sure we partner with you at every step of the process. We'll create the right opportunity for you. Some things come up quickly. I got a call from a senior leader a few months ago saying, the state just issued this and it doesn't meet this timeline. How can we get it done? Well, we got it done. So we have courier services. We have folks who do need to be part of the process, who need to sign off on things. Might be Neil Jasani, myself, Rob McMurray, sometimes Dr. Nevin, and everyone's busy. But getting all that stuff done in the final 10 days. Sometimes it does involve couriers and weekends and meeting people in parking lots and signing for stuff. Well, we get it done. But 10 days is a pretty short time to get all of that stuff done. It doesn't just sit in our office; it goes all over the place. So really encourage you guys to reach out to us as early as you can. We'll take any questions you want on the timeline. We'll certainly have time toward the end as well. So please keep those as well. I want to shift back to our discussion about value, about why we do the research to begin with. And we are in a very interesting place right now as a health system. And by that, I don't just mean Christiana Care. I mean that throughout essentially the U.S. health system universe. We started off as kind of being a fee-for-service in hospitals. And we were here, and across time, this is revenue over here, this is time. And across time, we actually started doing pretty well in that. We started figuring out how to do well in that marketplace. And now, as we're getting into value-based care, the first thing that many people see is a revenue drop as you're getting used to a new model. That's your dilemma. What do you do at that point? We, as Christiana Care, are very aggressively moving along this curve. We want to make sure that we actually provide high value, that we play by the rules, we make sure we provide exceptional care to our patients, and we will do well as a health system as a result. So we are probably just coming out of the dilemma zone right now, but that's where a lot of the innovation and interesting stuff is happening, including the disruptive innovation. You hear every other day about some health insurance company that's partnering with a pharmaceutical company that's partnering with X. People are trying to figure out their way in the new world, and we're certainly a big part of that here at Christiana Care. You read about our partnerships with the urgent care centers and other places, in the news as well. Those are really important. So in terms of our payment risk and how this is going to get, there's a fundamental difference of opinion sometimes on who should bear the risk, right? So if Christiana Care bears the risk, those are the payment models way up here. That's high risk for us. When the payer bears the risk, those are high here for them. So fee for service is classic model for us throughout the 80s and 90s. The payer thinks that's pretty high risk. Christiana Care, health systems, we think that we're actually pretty low risk in fee for service, right? We learned how to do that pretty well. Now, total cost of care, capitation. The payer pays you $20 and says, hey, just take care of this patient. Don't bother me with bill. Just here's your money and have a good time. Well, it's not really such a good time because then they only pay us $20 and we actually may need 50 to care for the patient appropriately. And that's the risk that then we have to take on. So somewhere in the middle is the shared gains and losses, shared savings, pay for performance. And that's the world we currently live in. And all of you, knowingly or not, actually we all live in this world as a largely clinical enterprise. That this is really what drives much of the economic engine of Christiana Care. And this is important because that drives everything else as well. This is just a quick look at behind the covers as to the financial strength and income statement that we've had. I'll just show you. Just look at operating margin. That's the margin. We're a nonprofit organization. We have to have we reinvest in our community constantly, and we have a margin which is what is above our expenses. So if you just look at the numbers here, 2014 we were at 6% operating margin. 2015 7.3%, 7.4%. This was around the time of the Affordable Care Act as well, that actually boosted many health systems' operating margin. And we're dropping down back to 6.8, 5.4. This is not a large number. 5% on a budget of about $2 billion is not a lot of money. Simple things sometimes, parking lots, new buildings, facilities, they can blow your budget. And at that point, you don't have a margin. And if you don't have a margin, it decreases our ability to do the important stuff that we know that we need to do. That includes reinvesting in ourselves, in our communities, and yes, in research as well. So this is important to recognize, the kind of world we're living in. Next year, we're not sure what we're going to look like, but it's not going to go back up to the sevens anytime real soon. As I mentioned, for us here, research administration, we have a large range of the kind of awards we see coming through the door. That's all your awards that we see coming through. So last year, we had an award as small as $2,283, and the largest was $17.95 million. So if you look at the 10th percentile of awards, the bottom 10% in terms of money, that's about $10,000. So 10% of awards are $10,000 or less. 20% of our awards are $20,000 or less. Our 40th percentile even is $50,000. So this is important. Almost half of our awards are less than $50,000 to $70,000. That's interesting. That's not great. That's not great when you have a lot of such small awards, because the amount of time it takes to do those awards is about the same. The 40-day timeline, the 60-day timeline, the 10-day timeline, guess what? Everyone's still going to sign off on a $10,000 award just as to do on a $10 million award. So all of us as a research community should think about, does this scale down appropriately? Does this make sense? Should I be spending a lot of my time as an investigator on $20,000, $30,000, even $100,000 awards? Do I really want to put together a coalition around really important, high-value, honestly big-ticket items where we can do the work that we're supposed to do? We're a big institution. And some of these awards honestly make me think like, we kind of still think we're a small community hospital. Some of it's important. Sure, $10,000 award for the community, reinvestment, absolutely important. But I would warrant that if you look at all of our portfolios and say, is everything in here the highest value for my time? I think we're going to have some interesting answers. And that's really for you guys to look at as well. We're not necessarily going to talk about cost share right now, but cost share is basically the amount of funds that the institution absorbs because the grant doesn't pay for it, very, very broadly speaking. We have a lot of cost share across the institution. We have a lot of grants that go in which require cost share from the institution. Cost share is real money. And when folks say, well, the F&A on this grant, the finance and administrative fee on this grant, Christiana Care says we should get paid 45%, we're only getting 15% from the funder. Well, that's okay. Well, it's not really okay because the other 30% that we didn't get now goes to cost share. And that cost share pays for stuff like lighting. It pays for stuff like where we are right now. This is not being paid for by clinical dollars right now, right? So how do we sustain that? So this is important. When we submit for a grant, it pays for salaries, pays for hard materials, but it has to include the overhead amounts that fund all the rest of the work that we do, right? Such as being in meetings, such as getting the important work done. So it's important to get to recover that cost. Last 3 years, our cost share percentage, a lot of range there, 0 to 395% across 170 awards. Again, the 10th percentile, look at the top 10th percentile, we're at 100% plus of cost share. If somebody's applying for a $100 grant, Christiana Care is supporting an extra $100 worth of that grant. That's interesting. That's something to think about. To get to a 50% cost share, we have to get to the 28th percentile. So that's really only 28% of our grants are 50% cost share or less. So just to give you a sense, as an institution, we're always happy to support research. But it has to be a two-way street. We have to be responsible about what is acceptable cost share. So generally speaking, proposals which have low enrollment numbers. Somebody says, well, we want you to spend all your time and energy as research administration, helping us apply for this grant, but I'm only going to enroll 2 patients in the next 3 years. That'll be a conversation, right? We'll talk about that. What value does this add? Is this important for us to be part of? And increasingly, there are genomic studies where, yes, indeed, we do enroll a very small number of patients across many institutions. So that is possible. But not all studies are like that. Some of them are just sponsors saying, oh, Christiana Care, they'll do 5 patients in 2 years. We should have a conversation about that. High cost share. When the numbers are very high in terms of what we're supporting as an institution, that will require a conversation. It's an important conversation. You guys are part of that. You tell us why this is important, why this is high value. And again, when there's very low funding amounts, maybe a $10,000 grant, let's talk. Let's figure out, before we put it to the hopper, what does this mean for us? These proposals may require more time if they need review by the cover committee. Several of us are on the cover committee. Dan Mira leads that group, and they really look at some of these exceptions, and it's basically your leadership. It's folks like myself and Dr. Bacon and Dr. Dan Mira and several others who sit around and say, well, let's figure out how to move this research forward. We're not a barrier. We want to make sure we facilitate that. Again, communication is absolutely critical. So for us, we see an opportunity for ongoing dialogue with all caregivers, that is every one of you. And we want to create new ways of communication, such as this. We're not physically in this building. The IRB is over in the Cancer Center. OSP and Research Finance are across the street at Hygeia Drive. But we're here. We're on email. We're on the phone. Come over to the office and chat. But I suggest that this approach isn't just an OSP approach, a research administration approach, or a departmental approach. It's all of our approaches. It's all of us thinking, if this was our tax dollars at work, how do we want it best to be spent? Does this research project make sense? How do I make it work? How do I make it maximally effective? And let's get this grant. Let's achieve, let's aim for success. So please utilize your contacts to help you with this. As always, I want to end again with our statement that we serve together, guided by our values of love and excellence, and we hope to embody that within our Office of Research Administration as well. So we'll stop there, and then we will come back up, and we'll be glad to take your questions, comments, criticisms, etc. So thank you again for your attention.
Very much for Omar and Debbie. Question? So I have a question.
Please.
So the FNA right now for research is pretty high. It's almost.
The FNA is variable, so but it's a good question. Finish your question though, please. Go ahead.
So that's where, in fact, the cost share issue is the problem.
Yes.
Because very often the foundations or other organizations, except for NIH, which will accept the rate of it.
Yes.
We'll have like PCORI. They don't have 60%.
Yes.
FNA, they have like 40%. So it seems a little arbitrary, to get to this super high FNA and then have this as a cost share.
Sure, that's a very good question. So I'm actually really interested in FNA. I'm probably the only person in the room who really likes knowing about FNA rates. And FNA rates are really, really important for institutions. They're set in a certain way. Institutions have to justify what kind of overhead that they incur legally, routinely, in order to put that on a grant application. There's a huge process that goes on behind that. We actually have a whole team led by a guy called Mario Voli, who's across the street in finance. And they do this thing called a Medicare cost report. It actually looks at everything that we spend money on and look at the actual overhead that we incur. And that rolls up into FNAs. And we submit that to the federal government. And they say, yep, that looks like your FNA. For those of you who've been around for a little while, do you know what our FNA used to be when Bob Laskowski first took over?
30%.
It was actually less than that. It was actually when Bob Laskowski took over before under Chuck Smith, and maybe Rob would remember this, it was, at that point, it was 15% FNA, 15%. We didn't even know how to do FNA. We just kind of said, 15% sounds about right. That's ridiculous. That should never have happened. So Dr. Laskowski actually said, let's look at FNA rates a little more carefully. So generally at institutions of our size and scope, the allowable FNA for federal awards is typically in the 60s to 70s. Johns Hopkins is 74%, University of Pennsylvania is 68%, and we are in the 60s as well. So for federal awards, that is the FNA. On the other hand, institutions come up with nuanced FNA rates all the time. Our FNA rates, honestly, right now are not particularly nuanced, and this is something that we all noticed when I took over in my role. I looked at the FNA again because I'm unusually interested. I said, why do we have just 5 FNA rates? We actually should have an off-campus rate, for projects that are being conducted off campus. They don't incur that kind of overhead. We don't have one right now. We should have a foundation F&A rate, because I do recognize when you guys apply for a foundation grant, foundation will tell you you'll get 0 to 5% to 8% maybe overhead. And if we say, well, you're subject to 67%, that's 59% cost share on an 8% thing that they're giving you. That's not fair. On the other hand, it's also not fair for you guys to only apply for foundation grants and get us 8% when our real costs are in the 40s, right? So there has to be a compromise, but we don't want to punish you on the foundation side. It's like getting paid for clinical dollars. You get punished on the Medicaid side, you make it up on the commercial side, and Medicare is somewhere in the middle. I don't like that very much. I like F&A rates to be accurate and appropriate. So we're actually working closely with Mario's team. We've talked about this with Rob McMurray. We're going to have new F&A rates in the next year or so. We're going to look at foundation rates. We're going to come up with a better foundation rate and probably off-campus rates. The federal rate is great. The feds pay us the money. That should be the highest justifiable rate. So that should remain the same. PCORI is an interesting one. Is it a foundation or the federal organization? It's a foundation. So theoretically, what they pay us should actually be okay. So it's not perfect. F&A is never perfect. Those of you who worked at institutions, you know F&A we never get it perfectly right. But it can be better, and we're absolutely working on that. So it's a good thought. Another question now that I've bored you to tears with F&A and finance. Yes, please. Sure. Everyone else is enjoying lunch or digestive lunch.
Sometimes we have collaborations with others, Delaware and and sometimes these collaborations are not funded. We start working with them and we would need a data use agreement. So our understanding, so does it need to go through you first? I mean, our understanding is that it needs to go through you, and then you coordinate with legal so that we can have the data use agreement. And in which circumstances non-funded work need to go to OSP?
Sure, it's a good question. So I'll let Debbie handle some of the details of the question. So I guess broad thing is, I would say non-funded work is an interesting concept. We should think about what non-funded work looks like. We should minimize non-funded work. I'm all for collaborations, but work should be funded, right? So somebody's getting value for our work, and we should make sure that we're adequately reimbursed, compensated. I actually think we are. We generally, when we collaborate with folks, we do. It may be in service of a grant application we're doing, and we do unfunded work for a couple of months, but it's actually going towards something. In my view, there should be no such thing as an unfunded mandate to do something forever. That should not occur. There are other mechanisms to do that unfunded work. Where there's medical societies, there's the Delaware Health Science Alliance, there's other ways to collaborate. But as an institution, I actually would think, let's look at why we're doing unfunded work to begin with. But your question was around data use agreements and where they go to. Debbie, do you want to talk about how you'd like to handle that?
So for all of activities and sponsored programs, our OSP box, which we had up there, which those of you who work with us are familiar with, every request for something to occur within the research area and sponsored programs comes into the OSP. And then we are reviewing that to make sure that the required and necessary things are included, and then we facilitate that with legal. So it's a convenience, it's consistent, and it's a process workflow that has been working well. If we happen to have those one-offs where it's something that wouldn't come to us, then we reach back out to whomever is involved and satisfy that need, but we really haven't had many of those. So I would say your safest is always to come to OSP with that, because whatever we get, whoever else needs to be involved with it, then we pass that along and coordinate that process. Is that good? They're not normally not. I don't know that we've seen a lot of not funded.
We had some circumstances where part of it was funded, and how to coordinate.
Yeah.
Collaboration, data, sharing data.
Yeah, so ultimately, I think it's going to land with us, and like you said, partially funded and not funded. So I think it's always safest to come to us. And again, if it's something that we don't need to be involved with, then we'll know. Those are kind of newer things, and so like with anything that comes in, if it comes in and it's a little different and strange, then we work with the departments and with legal and whomever else is involved to determine what path that should follow going forward.
Yeah, typically the way just to look at it is, are we putting our institution's name out there on a document? And are we signing on to do something involving research, data, grants, contracts? If the answer is yes, just send it to OSP. We'll take a look. At the most, we'll say, hey, listen, you don't need to have this go through us as intramural. It's PPC funded. It's whatever. That's fine. It's no big deal. But our team includes IRB, includes legal. Richard Deshevsky includes compliance. So we talk as a team routinely. We'll pick up the phone multiple times a day, honestly, to talk to each other, saying, hey, Richard, what do you think about this? Can we, do you need to see this? And say, yeah, I do. Send it over. We get the work done. So it's a benefit of having a small team, honestly, and knowing each other, is we can all have these conversations. So when in doubt, always just talk to us. Many DUAs are actually between institutions, certainly between DHSA institutions, Christiana Care, Jefferson, Nemours, and the University of Delaware. We have master research agreements and worked out DUA templates. So those typically don't take very long, except when there's odd and unusual things, and maybe everything is odd and unusual sometimes, like transfer of materials and placentas, David Paul, and other things like that we have to worry about, special circumstances that we have to work with. So, but yeah, every case is special. You've seen one research project, right? So, great. Other things? Questions, thoughts? Glad to talk about the nitty-gritty or about the value piece, and certainly welcome your comments, honestly, about the value piece. Those of you who see this, and those of you who study health policy, and those of you who teach it, and how does it jive with your experience at either other institutions, or how do you see the future of this work? What have you heard that's similar or different from our experience? Certainly would love to hear from any of you. Yes, sir.
My name is Ram. I'm one of the psychiatry residents. I've done some research at NYU before. And as an early career researcher, it's often difficult to go to NIH and ask for take sum of money.
Right.
Even the time constraint as a resident, we can spend 5 years here, so they're not money. So we have two options, either intramural grants or foundation grants. They are, of course, not that huge amount of money, but a limited time period, and serve the purpose of a pilot data collection.
Right.
In that case, does Christiana have some intramural grant available for residents?
Sure. No, good question. So your point of contact for much of residency research, first of all, is your program director. And those of you who've been department chairs, program directors can speak to this, but my general advice would be start with your program director. There's some amazing system-wide resources, though, who can help you with this, regardless of whether you're a resident or attending. Once you're at Christiana Care, there's many opportunities. Dr. Jerkovitz from the ACCEL program, volunteer her expertise, and Dr. Pappas, reach out to her and say, I'm doing this work, and we actually have a resident right now who's working on some projects as well. Is there somebody else working on this and I can tag on to this? Can I get some grant funding for this work? You guys don't have a lot of time, so that matters as well. I don't know if you know Dr. Jennifer Goldstein, or if Jen's still here. Oh, just stepped out. Dr. Goldstein, I think, Rob, Jen is still involved with a lot of the residence research supervision, and Jen is a terrific resource. Please reach out to Dr. Goldstein. She's in the Department of Medicine and the Value Institute, and she has mentored several folks. Many folks in this room, in fact, have served as mentors as well. But talk to a couple of key people. Again, virtually everyone knows each other, and you can just connect with 2 or 3 people and they'll get you hooked in. So many opportunities. From a department chair perspective, Dave, you're in the line of sight. Anything else for house staff that you'd recommend beyond those resources?
You mentioned the PPC grants.
Yep.
So that's through the department chair, the service line leader. So, essentially every chair gets one a year that they can sponsor, and that has an excellent chance. I think the limit is $75,000.
Yep.
But hopefully your chair is coming to you with that.
Right.
To let you know about it.
Yeah.
Every year.
And if they're not, if you don't hear about it because residents are busy and emails, you get a lot of emails, talk to your director, talk to your chair, saying I heard about this PPC thing these guys were talking about. When is the cycle for that? Can I partner with a senior researcher or an attending on that kind of project? And we'd love to see it. Several of us are on the committee to review those applications. But yeah, go through your chair, see what she thinks. Yeah. Good. Other things? Okay, very good. Well, we will close there, and thank you for your time and attention and the food, of course. And we're always here for you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.